All right, welcome everyone. Welcome. Um, Silas, I just lost your video. I'm not sure what happened. Anyway, welcome everyone, one and all, to Impolite Company on the WGCPR.live network, where we defy the old adage and dive headfirst into religion and politics. I'm your host, Matthew Best, here to walk with you in honest dialogue and showcase the power of seeing the humanity of people with different perspectives. You can send me your questions and comments to contactimpolitecompany@gmail.com. And you can find previous episodes and sign up to listen to new episodes through popular podcast channels like iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Just search for Impolite Company. Look for our logo, which is right behind me. You can see that there. And you can dive further into topics that we talk about on the show by going to my blog at pastormatthewbest.com. And if you enjoy what we're doing here and you want to be supportive of the show, and we ask you to please do that, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/impolite company. And before we dive into today's episode, I want to take a moment of some personal privilege to share a couple of things I care passionately about. The first, of course, as I talk about often, you can show some love to Christ Lutheran Church in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, in the heart of Allison Hill. It's the church I am called to serve as pastor. Christ Lutheran is a special place of community and of healing, which and what makes this church special is that we host 3 free health clinics that have over 100,000 visits since 2018. You can find out more. You can offer your support by going to christharrisburg.org. Let me just take care of something as I keep going in this. And if you care about homelessness, check out Memorial Blanket Project. Each year people make blankets for strangers, and we make an art installation to highlight homelessness and then give them away at the end of the night. We've done this in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, on the front lawn of the U.S. Capitol, last year on the steps of the PA Capitol. This year we're going to be at the Liberty Bell in Philadelphia, and you can help if you go to memorialblanket.org. Lastly, if you are looking for a tool to help with conversations on the difficult topic of gun violence while seeing the humanity of others, check out American Roulette. It's a unique novel that highlights the humanity of the victims, the community, and even the perpetrator while offering no solutions, just conversation. All proceeds of the book go to organizations that address gun violence. So I've got a guest who was on, and oh, here he comes. All right, let's see. This is how it works. All right, and they're right on time, Silas, which is really great. Because yeah, that's right, a dramatic entrance. I just went through my whole introduction, and I'm like, all right, I think he's going to come back. I'm sure he's going to come back. And so anyway, so today I am pleased to welcome Silas Kulkarni to the show. He's here in his personal capacity, not in his professional position with the churchwide organization. So he works in faith-based political advocacy in both Congress and the executive branch. Silas brings a passion for social and racial justice that is deeply connected to his faith and past work. Earlier in his career, Silas worked as a teacher in low-income communities and a grassroots organizer. He also founded and was executive director of an education equity nonprofit. More recently, he served as the senior fellow for public discourse at the grassroots depolarization organization Braver Angels, which we're going to talk about as we go through this, helping facilitate productive conversations between conservatives and progressives. And he strives to bring this spirit of willingness to engage with politically and culturally diverse communities to his faith life and political work. Lives in D.C. with his 2 young children and his wife, who is an ELCA pastor, who I had the privilege of knowing a little bit in seminary. So it is great. Thank you so much for taking some time to be on the show, Silas. That's right. That's good. That's good. Yeah, right. As you were saying, it's on the internet, so it's permanent now, right? It's even more permanent than if it was etched in stone. Stone wears away. Internet is forever, right? Anyway, so let's dive in to this post-election world. Here we are. It's a couple weeks after the election. It was extremely divisive election that, and we're still. I think there's still a lot of, I guess the best way to describe it, heavy feelings that people have. I think there's a lot of folks who are glad the ads are done, and there's a sense of relief in that. There's a sense of relief in the idea of it seems like there's going to be a smooth transition of power, but there's still a lot of tension. There's a lot of can I trust people? All this type of stuff. When you're encountering folks from across the country or wherever, and you're talking with people, what are you encountering with people? What are they feeling? Yeah, yeah, sure, yeah, right, yeah, yeah, yeah. Mm, yeah, right, yeah, yeah, right, absolutely. Yeah, there's a whole lot to talk about with that. So when we were talking a couple of weeks ago on the phone, talking about what we were going to talk about, you had mentioned about there's a whole lot of analyzing that's been going on, right? And I find I have not really been watching the analyzing because I think it would drive me insane. Because oh, it's people voted this way because of this, and it's like, oh, this is the one thing, or they voted this way because of this, and then there's a multitude of 20,000 others that these folks think that they all have the answer to why somebody votes, and there's a whole range, right? I mean, it's and that's a bad assumption that politics is rational. Oftentimes, it's not rational at all. Like there's a certain percentage that if you're at the top of the ticket, you're going to get like an extra 1% or something like that. Like that's not rational, but that's how some people vote. So it's not easy to discern what's accurate and what's not. I mean, this is part of the larger picture, right? Of misinformation and all this type of stuff widespread. So here's my question: is how do we discern what's an accurate assessment of election results or even just anything versus what we're feeling? What are your thoughts on that? Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah, right. Yep, right, right. Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Of course. Yeah. 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 Mhm. Mhm. Okay. Yeah. Oh yeah. 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 Mhm. Right. Sure. Sure. Right. Right. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Okay. Wow. Wow. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Uh huh. Yeah. 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 Right. Mm-hmm. Right. Interesting. Right. Yeah. Right. Oh, sure. Right. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, sure. Well, right. Well, and this kind of reminds me of the reality that there are very few people who are one issue voters, right? There's definitely a segment of the population that they have one issue and this is what they're going to vote on. Typically, this will fall into like abortion is oftentimes ends up being a one issue voter type of thing. And so that's what they're paying attention to and that's what they're voting on, and anything else doesn't matter. But the vast majority of people are not one issue voters, or it's not, I'm only going to find out about this one issue and that's the only thing that matters. But generally, they have, this is where it gets really complicated, right? Because you've got people who may or may not have heard the things that Trump had said, and may not have liked those things, and may have thought, well, that's terrible. However, they also then identified on something else that was more important for them in their assessment of whatever it is that they're looking at, and they determined, well, I'm going to vote this way because of X, Y, and Z, and not because of A, B, and C, whatever the case may be. And then this ends up being the complication is we have so many issues that end up being addressed in a political campaign that it's kind of like how we've gone from having 3 networks to having there's a network essentially for every person. And so that makes it really complicated, and people have these whole kind of calculus of how they're going to vote for things, or how they're going to vote in an election, and they have different values, they have different priorities, they have different all of this type of stuff, and it makes it much more difficult then to even get to any type of analysis, because you're just kind of muddying it up, and it gets away from all these like common narratives, right? I mean, this is kind of the big thing is we're in a post meta narrative culture, to use some trendy words, right? But there's not, right? I remember I forgot who it was, Cal Thomas or somebody like that, who wrote, and he's more on the conservative thing, and this is going back years ago. I remember this from when I was in college in the late 90s. And he talked about it then, and the idea that we don't have a common, essentially, experience as a culture. That's at the beginning of like the internet. And he's like, the most common thing that we have is the Super Bowl. It's the most, right, which is so very polarized, but it was this common experience where nowadays you don't have like the epic movies generally that were back in the Technicolor days of things, and you don't have just everyone tuning in to Walter Cronkite for the news, and you don't, and people aren't all that type of stuff. So yeah, I think it is really important, the data. I do want to ask you about this, so a little bit different. What are your thoughts about fact checking? Yeah. Well, all right. So here's where I think oftentimes, like the especially the cable networks, right? They went really all in on fact checking to convey a message, and honestly, I thought they were wasting their time, because in order for fact checking to have value, there needs to be a shared set of values of what truth is and what matters, and does truth matter, and all of those type of things, and even foundational, what I call creedal beliefs. There's a lot of people operating on the belief that the ends justifies the means. Now, I don't agree with that, but if the ends justifies the means, then fact checking is a waste of time, because that's not the most important thing for somebody who holds that. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Right. Yeah. 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 Right. Right. Yeah. No, I appreciate that. Hmm. Right. Yeah. That's things we hear that we pastors hear in churches. People are saying not helpful. That's not helpful. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Uh huh. Yeah. Of course. Right. Right. Oh, yeah, right. Right. Sure. Uh huh. Yeah. Sure. Sure. Right. 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 Yeah. Right. 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 Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, 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 sure, sure, right. Of course not. Right. I mean, it's this kind of divide that goes on. I, I, I remember having a conversation with somebody, I don't know who it was. And we were talking about the sense that, there's those of us who are very engaged, um, to the point where we have a difficult time understanding how someone could not get information, right? Because there's so much of it, and it just like overwhelm. It's like standing at the base of Hoover Dam and it blows open on you. Like how do you avoid that? I find myself, that's my world, is how could you possibly go through and not have all of this information? The concept of an undecided voter. Oftentimes I'm like, how did you, were you asleep for the last 2 years? Like there has been a lot of stuff, and how do you possibly avoid it? But yet, that's the reality. Is there's a lot of people who just, it's not their priority. They are not tuned in, uh, for any number of reasons, and so then there, and you got a lot of folks who don't travel. They don't have an interest, or they can't, or whatever the case may be. They're in their everyday lives, and that's what they're doing. And so then it becomes, to me, when I hear people complain about the economy, I'm always like, people don't have any sense of what economy actually is. They're actually talking about their own checking account. That's what they're talking about. They're not talking about the economy, because they don't. Most people, I don't, including me, cannot tell you about the economy. Yeah, right. Right. I mean, like, most of us have no concept of, yeah, we know that, oh, there's an economy, but we can't tell you about like GDP and all this other stuff. Most people can't even name what that is, let alone what the impact, and then how trade works, and all of that type of stuff. So it's not actually. So this kind of gets into something else, which I'm fond of talking about, which is, we're all using the same language, oftentimes, but we're not using the same definition of words. Right? I mean, this is the idea of. I think probably the best example has to do with either liberty or freedom. Right? I have an idea of what freedom means. And freedom is kind of, this idea of I can do what I want within boundaries and reasonable type of things, as long as it's not harming someone else. That's a very general, simple, basic definition. But then there are other people that freedom means, I'm right, therefore I have the freedom to impose on you in order for you to get it right. That type of thing, right? But we're both using the same word of freedom, but we're not communicating. We're not communicating because we're not sharing the same definitions of things. And so this kind of is a good segue into depolarization, which you have an extensive background in. And so I want to talk about a little bit about depolarization. First of all, there's again, since we were just talking about definitions, how would you define the term depolarization, and and why is it important? Why would you say it's important? Yep. Okay. Mm-hmm. Right. Would you say that that also then gets into the sense of identity and how we identify ourselves, and so it gets into a very core sense of being. Would you say that's a fair way to put it? Right. Mm-hmm. Right. Right. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. 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 Hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Right. Yeah. Right. 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 Yep. Right. 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 Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. 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 Right. Right. Well, so I would say in response that the government is working exactly the way it was designed. Um, because my take on the history is that our founders did not trust people, right? They didn't trust the king, that's for sure, and they didn't trust that people would be doing the best thing. There's a lot of self-interest and all this type of stuff, and so they created a system of government that was not efficient. And that, right, this goes back to the Federalist Papers and all this type of stuff of you have to be really careful with factions, right? James Madison, one of the Federalist Papers, I think number 10, I don't remember, factions, right? And so a very big concern is making sure that factions don't get their way for the purposes of the general common good. And so government is designed to be inefficient. The most efficient forms of government are tyranny, because it's whoever is in charge says it, and therefore it's the law. Democracy is messy, and it's disruptive, and it is slow, and it is inefficient, and that is not a bad thing. However, I will say, while it worked the way it was supposed to, the part of that is also it's supposed to be motivation then to figure out how we can compromise and figure out how we're going to live together and actually make some kind of progress. That part has not been working. There hasn't been enough pain, essentially, to get people to say, you know what, this whole purity test thing, not working. We're not getting what we want, and we're not going to, because there's other people who have a different purity test, who are just as entrenched. And we're, you know, like when words fail, bullets start to fly type of thing, right? So in one sense, I think there is a section of it that is working the way it's supposed to. But it's not causing, like, people are not seeing that, oh, this should be a wake-up call for, we should take a different approach, that so that we can get some things done, and we need to move away from all of that. I'm wondering too, there's a couple of books, as you're talking about some things, there's a couple of books that are coming to mind. One is Why We're Polarized by Ezra Klein. I don't know if you read that. Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. The other two books that came to my mind were The Righteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt. You know, really kind of getting into the deeper sense, right, of identity and all that. And the other book that kind of plays around with that is Negotiating the Non-Negotiable, which again, like, that book with The Righteous Mind really gives a good sense of, let's get past the surface level to the really deeper things that people care about, and what motivates them to do what they're doing in that. Yeah, sure. I highly recommend it. I've done a book review on my blog. You can search for that. People can search for that. I think last name is I think it's Kennedy. I'm not sure. I don't have it right in front of me, but oh yeah, it's Dan Shapiro. Yes, that's it. Yep, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean that. Yeah. Right. Right. There's another book, and I'm just looking it up. Richard Slotkin just did this, A Great Disorder, and it's about national myth and the battle for America. So he talks about 5 national myths that really kind of shape our discourse and policy. Again, it kind of goes along with all the things that we're talking about. Highly recommend it. I mean, it really taps into what are the myths that we use and we talk about, regardless of how true those myths are. Of course, there's elements of truth in myths, but those shape so much. These are things that can really kind of form a nation, pretty much is the idea with that. So we got about 10 minutes left, which, man, I'm like, phew. Yeah. It's all right. No. It's good. This is exactly the type of thing. I'm glad that you were able to come on and just kind of like, I need to unload all of this stuff that I've been holding inside. Yeah. Right, absolutely. So this is great. So with the limited time we have, I want to go back to something that you were talking about, is that this kind of personal cost. I see people, especially on social media, talk about, or in conversations, talk about how they just can't anymore. They just can't, be connected to somebody on social media. They just can't, like, there's people who are like, no Thanksgiving this year. or whatever the case may be. And you know, I get that to some degree. There are people that I have certainly cut off because it was not in a healthy way. Like I am connected to people who I disagree with, and that's fine. That's great. But it's kind of like you were talking about, that kind of polarization. I'm registered nonpartisan. I don't have an interest in promoting either political party. I don't have a whole lot of trust in political parties. I've worked in one, so that's where that comes from. But yeah, right. But there are people who I disagree with that I can have conversations, and we can talk about policy and all that type of stuff, because they're not seeing me in a dehumanizing way, and I'm not seeing them in a dehumanizing way. But there are people that it's like, whoa, like, okay, I need to kind of protect myself from that, but not in a way that I'm going to then turn around and do the same thing of dehumanize and all that type of stuff. I'm just wondering, thoughts on, you know, how do people create a space where they can, I don't know what even the words are, that they can feel valued or safe or whatever the case may be, still be in relationship with, you know, how do people discern who to be in relationship with, especially when they have differences? Yeah. 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 Right. Well, we got 7 minutes. Woo! Yeah. 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 Right. 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 Whatever names. Right. Right. Yeah. 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 Right. 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 Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right. Because if social media worked the way that we've been told that it was, then gosh, a whole lot of people would be changing their minds based on memes. Right. Yeah. Right. Right. Because it. Oh yeah. Well, I will tell you on my own personal end, since the election, I have not gone to any digital media for news. It's not that I'm uninformed. I hear plenty. I don't need to, but I will tell you, I'm in a much better mental and emotional health. Same thing. I have not gone and watched even any clips of late night shows because I think it's kind of in the same realm of the news media. Yeah. So I miss out on some funny jokes and all that, but I think there's a whole lot of demeaning that goes on. Right. This is that whole us and them type of thing going on. Right, right. So, okay, we got 2 minutes left. So, Silas, is there any other bits of wisdom in about 1 minute that you would like to, that is so essential that the audience needs to hear about anything that we've talked about? All right, you got like 50 seconds. Mm, perfect. Thank you so much. You have the last say on all of this. So I'm so very glad that you took some time to come on to the show. It's my first show post election, and I feel like this was a really rich conversation talking about things that I know they've been on my mind, and I think you've really been very helpful, at least for me, and hopefully for the audience as well. So thank you very much, Silas. All right. Thanks. And everyone, have a great day.